Okay, so anyway, I'm going to start with the content. And if there is any question, you can post it in the chat window, and I will ask Daniela or someone to read it to me because I cannot see the chat window from my mobile. Speaker is audio off, join now. Right, so let me tell you what this course is about. So I think you have seen artificial intelligence over and over again for the past like years, and there is like what we believe a very confusing narrative around artificial intelligence. It gets very difficult to try to get any sense because there is a lot of noise about like different interpretation of what is artificial intelligence. We will understand it as any method that is used for tasks that normally will require human intelligence, right? And we have a number of different methods that can be used that are of that type. There is an alternative definition to artificial intelligence that I think it will be very helpful for you to be aware of, is that artificial intelligence is about adaptive systems. So systems that can learn from the world, and they also can have an effect on the world and then learn again from the effect that they have on this physical world, right? So artificial intelligence is either like methods that allow to do tasks that were before done using human intelligence, or adaptive methods that can adapt. Right? And we will talk about human recommendation, that is, in a broad sense, any application of computing where the intention is to recommend people, categorize or classify people, rank, order, sort people according to some criteria. And this, there is a wordplay here that is intentional between human resources and human recommendation, because human recommendation is a bit broader than human resources. Human recommendation also involves things such as, for instance, a dating app, or an application to find a medical doctor instead of or a dentist, right? So these are all tasks where you have a system that recommends you an item, and that item is not a movie, is not a song, it's a person. Now, our focus on this course will be on discrimination. And we will understand discrimination, and this is a definition of a philosopher, Casper Lippe Rasmussen, as any systematic disadvantage that is experienced by a socially salient group. So discrimination has to be systematic, so it has to be something that a group experiences over and over again. It has to be a disadvantage, not an advantage. And it has to be experienced by a socially salient group. And a socially salient group is a group of people that can be very easily identified. They maybe have some external characteristic, or there is something that makes it evident that you belong to this socially salient group. For instance, men, women, people who have a disability, people who are blonde, like different groups of people may belong to socially salient groups, right? And our perspective in this course will involve two elements, and my colleague Mariana will elaborate on this in the afternoon today and then tomorrow morning, because she takes a much more deep look at these things. Our perspective is anti-discriminatory in the sense that we want to attempt to not only to be free from discrimination, but we also want to fight discrimination. And you will see many examples that we will give throughout the course where discrimination is not intentional, but discrimination happens as a result of some decisions that look quite innocent and you could say quite fair and quite neutral on the surface, but in reality, the consequences of those decisions are discriminatory. And we will also take an intersectional perspective. That means that we would like to consider different ways in which the different axes of discrimination, different identities of a person intersect, right? So this is why we will take this intersectional approach. Now, today we will see a few things. First, I will try to motivate why we're doing this course. I will show you many examples of discrimination in artificial intelligence. That's my field of expertise. I have been doing that for the past 8 years, researching different ways in which artificial intelligence can discriminate. And we will look a little bit about why these systems that are built sometimes with very good intentions and with very neutral characteristics, they end up discriminating people, even if their intention is not to discriminate, right? But why does this happen? So let me start with a little motivation. So let me describe some of the keywords that we will use throughout the course, right? So first, we are very motivated by this field of algorithmic hiding. So algorithmic hiding, we call algorithmic hiding, and it's defined in the paper. The reference is at the bottom of the slides, and you can access all of the slides, all of the content of the course through the Moodle. Algorithmic hiding is defined as the usage of any tools that use artificial intelligence for scoring, for evaluating candidates for a job. And there are many different tools that constitute algorithmic hiding. You have tools, for instance, that can select or pre-filter the candidates that fulfill a certain set of criteria. There are tools that can order or organize or rank the candidates from the most likely to be a good fit for the job to the least likely, or fit them by according to filter them according to certain keywords, and so on. And there are even very advanced applications that, for instance, they use your voice or your image or your photo or your video to try to infer some characteristics about you. And they are used in some algorithmic hiding pipelines. And also there are many online games and tests that you can, sometimes there are hiding pipelines where you have some games that you have to play, and depending on the score of those games, you can advance or not to the next step in the recruitment process. So all of these tools together are what we call algorithmic hiding tools, because they involve some use of artificial intelligence for the processing of job candidates. And our focus in particular will be on tools that select and rank candidates according to some criteria. Why? Because those tools actually determine to a large extent the fate of these different candidates. If you are placed at the bottom of a list of 200 candidates, you're very unlikely to be seen. But if you're placed near the top of the list, then you are way more likely to be seen by a recruiter and perhaps to get an interview or to advance to the next step in the recruitment process. Now, Europe is a place where algorithmic hiding is increasingly being used. We have some evidence that in Europe is the place where algorithmic hiding is growing faster, and particularly by, and you are an international audience, you come from many countries. In some of your countries, public employment services are either number one or number two in terms of platforms that people use to find jobs. In some countries, the number one, number two platform are private companies that use to which you submit your CV, and they intermediate between candidates and job positions. But in some countries, public employment services, which constitutes an even more interesting case, because then a public employment service will have even a higher duty to be fair with the candidates, right? And why are human resource departments adopting these algorithmic hiding tools? I would say not because they are incredibly effective, but because human resource departments are really struggling with a large number of applications never seen before. So we have, for instance, these statistics that jobs that used to attract 120 applicants in 2010 now attracts over 250, and I think the numbers can be larger now, especially for corporate job positions, right? So algorithmic hiding tools are becoming somehow a necessity for human resource departments that are seeing these enormous increase in the number of applications. It's increasingly easy to apply for a job, to submit your CV for a job. Of course, many of the applications are then irrelevant, or they don't match the minimum requirements of the job positions and so on. So there is a certain crisis, I would say, going on, and this crisis has motivated, at the same time as the arrival of artificial intelligence tools have created this scenario where algorithmic hiding tools are used so strongly. Now, LinkedIn a few years ago was interviewing human resource professionals, and many of them say, the large majority said that the impact of artificial intelligence in recruitment was going to be at least somehow significant, right? And interestingly, LinkedIn asked many human resource professionals about where did they see artificial intelligence could be more helpful. And they said, well, it could be helpful in sourcing candidates. That means finding job applicants for a job. Then screening, that means filtering who complies or satisfies the minimum requirement for a job. Then nurturing candidates, which means engaging with the candidate in a communication that makes it likely that a good candidate will accept eventually a job offer and join a company, right? This human resource professional also saw it less helpful artificial intelligence tool to engage with candidates or even to have the artificial intelligence interview candidates. Now, remember, this was in 2018, so maybe things have changed by now. But at that time, this is how AI was seen by human resource professionals. So I would like now to ask you a question, which is this one, right? So what will be what are the top actions that HR professionals expect AI to impact their work? And you can, if you go to wooclub.com and use the code FINDHR1, you should see a way of answering this. You go to wooclub, like the URL is at the top of the screen, wooclub.com, and you use the code FINDHR1, and you should see this screen. I will give you time. I have 6, 7 answers, 9 answers.
Exactly. Super. I put the link and the code. Yeah.
wooclub.com and use the code FINDHR1.
Yeah. I put the link in the chat. Yeah.
17. We are 71, so we will wait a little bit more. 21 answers, 22 answers, and growing. So this is an important, like you make these little exercises, it will help you also it will help you remember things, and it will help us also understand how things are progressing. It will help you not fall asleep. It will help you to not fall asleep during the lecture too. Give people a little bit more. So wooclub.com, code FINDHR1.
And you have to leave the WooClub application open because there are other questions in the following. So don't close the navigation tab, the browser tab.
Okay, let's give 10 more seconds for people to answer. If you haven't done it, you just go to wooclub.com and use the code FINDHR1. We're waiting for one more. All right, so let's look at this. Yeah, so the top actions are actually to source and to screen candidates. Like human resource professionals in this study that LinkedIn did a few years ago did not see much help, did not see that AI was going to have a big impact in interviewing candidates, although this could have changed in the past. But according to the slides, the correct answer would be sourcing candidates or screening candidates. And if you didn't get that right, don't worry. There will be more questions coming in a moment. Okay, so just leave that wooclub.com interface open so that you can participate in the next question. So if we start, let's now try to understand how human resource professionals can see AI and how they can see this, right? So first, there are things that as in many things, and I'm a computer scientist, so this is how we usually see and organize things. There are here in the x-axis, there is the automation potential. What does it mean? It means the extent to which a task can be automated, right? And there are tasks that can be highly automated, like trying to collect resumes or to schedule the interviews and so on. And then there are tasks that are very difficult to automate, such as automating a negotiation, right? So how can you automate? It's something very difficult to do, right? So there are tasks that have high potential of automation. And then there are tasks where a human actually can add value, right? So for instance, a task where a human can actually add a lot of value is to sell, quote unquote, the role for which a person is applying, right? So that's and what we are looking for, or what people who develop like artificial intelligence tools for human resources, they usually are looking at this green quadrant here. They are looking at tasks that have strong potential for automation and that don't necessarily need a person to be present, right? So for instance, updating an applicant tracking systems or applicant tracking system, or removing duplicates, or collecting and parsing the resumes. These kind of tasks are the typical tasks where we would like some automation to happen. Now, having arrived to this point, if you have any question, you can paste it in the chat now. I will hear from Daniela or from someone who can read the question aloud. But if you have any question by now, you can post it in the chat. If not, I will just continue. But if you have a question. No. All right. Good. I love when things are clear. We can move on. Great. So let's talk a little bit about discrimination, right? So why is this course about artificial intelligence and discrimination? There is a very good reason. And the reason is that basically any application of AI, all of the applications of AI that we have seen, especially the applications of AI where you have some involvement of humans, have been found to have discriminatory biases and have been documented to have this discriminatory bias. So it's not just a matter of like anecdotes that one particular system was discriminatory to some people, right? So there have been extensive documentation in basically all applications domains of AI of discriminatory biases of some form. And these discriminatory biases typically in other applications of AI, and I will give you many examples, these biases, typically what they do is that they take some pre-existing bias and they amplify it, or they reproduce it. Like typically reproduce and amplify is the most damaging thing, and it tends to happen, right? So you have this discriminatory bias that exists in a certain application, in a certain domain, and it's amplified and reproduced by an artificial intelligence, right? And because of this, and not only because of discrimination, but because artificial intelligence have been found, artificial intelligence applications in many domains have been found to have many problems, one of which is discriminatory biases. There have been a very strong push in the European Union for a regulation of artificial intelligence. And we will have lectures specifically about that topic in this course. We will hear Nina, who introduced herself like previously. Nina will tell us about like the AI Act and the GDPR and other regulation that applies to this domain. But let me give you a quick overview. The AI Act was proposed in April 2021 and was like passed like very recently, like maybe a few weeks ago, and it defines for our purposes a couple of interesting classes of applications. So first, it forbids certain things, right? It forbids companies to sell or deploy in Europe artificial intelligence tools that use subliminal techniques to manipulate you and affect your behavior. That's forbidden in Europe. There is also a prohibition of social scoring mechanisms, which are ways in which a person is transformed into a number, and that number is used for a number of applications that have nothing to do with how that number was computed, and it's like a general number. What you could have heard about this being described as a social scoring. And it also defines, in addition to these forbidden applications, high-risk applications of AI. And it lists which are those high-risk applications. And it doesn't say that the technology is forbidden. I think that's really interesting. So in the AI Act, the idea is not to forbid certain technologies, but is to declare that certain applications are high risk. And the applications are these, like when you have a system that does some biometric, or a system that manages some critical infrastructure, or a system that affects your access to education, employment, or public services or benefits. Any system that is using law enforcement, migration, and justice. These are considered high-risk applications of AI. Now, there are three high-risk applications of AI that involve human recommendation. These are access to education, access to employment, and access to public and essential services. And we care about here number 4, which is the access to employment. Now, in all of these cases, access to education, think when you apply for a master program, for instance, or for a diploma or for a course, if there is artificial intelligence being used there, or if there is artificial intelligence being used in whenever you submit an application for a benefit from the government, if there is any selection, screening, filtering, or if there is any ranking, evaluation, profiling, assessment, and so on, then that will constitute a high-risk application area of AI. And these look very similar to the kind of applications that we see in algorithmic hiding. Now, let's look at your concentration for now. Like if you go to wooclap.com, code FINDHR, like which types of applications that the AI Act define? Doing the quick concentration check or attention check. What types of application, which kinds of application does the AI Act define? I know that at least 50 of you are answering, so I will wait until 50 and then show you the results. All right, so let's look at the results. The AI Act defines forbidden and high-risk application. That's the bulk of the AI Act, are these two kinds. In addition, there are other kinds of application, but if I'm not mistaken, they are not called medium risk or low risk. There is like residual risk, or I think minimal or marginal risk. Like I think Nina can correct me if I'm wrong, but I will remember it will be something like minimal risk. But the ones that we care about are these forbidden application and high risk applications. The others, if I recall correctly, they are not named like this in the AI Act. So let's move on. Now, let me, as I said, I can give you examples of discrimination in artificial intelligence. As I said, basically every application of artificial intelligence, every application domain of artificial intelligence, discriminatory biases have been documented. So here are some examples like credit scoring, deep fakes, AI hiding, Facebook ad serving algorithms, insurers, border control, everything. Like every week, if you follow news about artificial intelligence, you will find a new place where artificial intelligence have been found to be discriminatory. And the typical problem areas here are things such as education, like for instance, I will show you a case about university admission, justice, finance, like credit scoring, for instance, and of course, employment. And I would show you some examples. So I would like to ask you, if you're in the chat, if you have you ever heard about any discriminatory, any news? Have you ever heard any news about discrimination on AI? And if you can, maybe in the chat, like throw one line about if you remember some case about AI discriminating, and you can just throw it in the chat like quickly.
Yeah. Can you see the chat?
No, but you can read it to me.
Mortgage selection, court decision. Yeah. Oh, a lot of. Yeah. So mortgage selection, court decisions.
Court decisions, yes.
I'm not understanding cost scoring, the Dutch welfare scandal, CV selection, and Amazon.
The Dutch welfare scandal is there. Yes.
Sorry, Dutch.
Yes.
Sorry. Credit scoring, dating apps, facial recognition, social benefits in the Netherlands, word to back, court bail decisions, Amazon CV, facial recognition not recognizing black faces. Yes, the
Great.
welfare scandal in Netherlands, job consulting chatbot.
Great. I love this audience. Like this is a
What
very
for
this is a highly
example,
educated
in the
audience.
job
They know their.
interviews in a Polish school, they were using facial recognition, like face screening in job interviews.
Thanks. Wow, that's okay. So I love this because it means that you're
Google
already aware.
Translation misgenerating discriminatory images. UK case of Uber app not recognizing darker faces and therefore worker could not log in. Oh,
Yeah,
yes,
there are tons of
ChatGPT
these.
racial bias.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, so there, I love that. Like, I think many of our students for the course are aware of these things. Maybe some of you then have read the book by Cathy O'Neill, Weapons of Mass Destruction. This is a book from 2016, and it was really influential in my own kind of work. And if you haven't read it, we have many recommended readings in the course, and this is one of those. It's a book that describes, yes, all these problem areas where like artificial intelligence have been documented to have discriminatory biases. So, for instance, somebody mentioned here, right? So, in the UK, there was particularly during COVID, there was COVID lockdown. Many students could not take their final exams, so their grades in some particular tests were not collected directly from the student, but inferred on the basis of a formula, and that had all kind of like very discriminatory and complex consequences because it is a prediction of the score a student would have had and not the real score. And standardized tests, and I have been studying them in my own work as predictors of performance. Actually, you have in many situations students that have come from disadvantaged backgrounds that they have when they may have on average lower grades in standardized tests for instance, admission to the university, but once they enter, they actually can perform better than students that are better off. So it's a really interesting scenario, and there is even like a case where for 7 years the University of Texas at Austin was using an evaluator for master students, right? So you will apply for a master degree or for a PhD degree program, for a PhD program, for a master program at the University of Texas. And sorry?
Carlos, could you repeat the name of the book, please?
Yeah, okay. It's at the bottom of this slide. Weapons of Mass Destruction.
Oh, okay, thank you. Right.
Yeah, it's at the,
okay.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, so this program that the University of Texas used for 7 years was trained on a database of past admissions, past admission decisions. And typically what it will do is that you are applying for a master program, you submit your application and your letter of recommendation, and the system will decide whether you have one reviewer, in which case you are very unlikely to get into the program, or whether you can be reviewed by the admission committee, in which case you have a chance. And this was found to be discriminatory, of course, because it was trained on a database of past admission decisions that have their own biases. So I have also worked for many years with the Department of Justice of Catalonia here in Barcelona, and we have been looking at applications of AI in justice. And one of the one that we have studied more is the prediction of recidivism. You may have seen this article called Machine Bias in ProPublica, which is a very highly recommended reading, Machine Bias. It's in an investigative journalism publication called ProPublica. And then there is something like Veripol, which was a language processing tool that was used to detect people who were providing fake reports of theft, which was found to be also very problematic. So there are feedback loops in credit scoring. Some of you mentioned those. For instance, if you have a low credit score, then maybe it's hard to get a job, or maybe it's hard to get a loan, and then or the loan has a higher interest rate, the loan that you actually can get with your low credit score, which means some financial hardship, and in the end, this is a feedback loop, right? Now, there are many questions here about what you can do with artificial intelligence and what you should do, right? And I think, so for instance, let me put this question out there, right? So suppose that somebody puts on Facebook or Instagram that they are going to couples therapy with their partner, with their married partner, right? And now one of these companies, one of these person applies for a mortgage, right? Should the bank use this information? Of course, we believe it shouldn't. But the capability, what's interesting is that the capability is there. The capability to detect that there is, or to find this information that this couple is attending couples counseling, so there is a risk that they whatever, they will not stay together, and therefore they will not be able to pay mortgages in the same conditions as in the past. So there are a number of these sort of situations, right? So finally, and I think this is finally for this part, like what concerns us is algorithmic hiding. So it's the usage of AI labor, and you have seen all of these things like job search engines. They do have rankings that exaggerate differences between candidates. You have on Google, it has been documented that, for instance, at some point in Google, if you were searching for a job, if you were searching for a job, the probability that you will see an advertising for a high-paying job was reduced if you tell Google that you're a woman. Right? So in Google, when you complete your profile in your Google account, you have optional questions. You can enter your date of birth, and you can enter your gender. And what one researcher discovered was that if you put that you're a woman, then Google will not show you will show you less ads for high-paying jobs if you search for jobs in the search engine, right? So that was a real kind of wake-up call about somehow unintentional, perhaps negligent ways in which discrimination appears in these like massive search engines. Now,
there's a question. What
please?
Is your view on human biases in the light of algorithmic biases?
In what? Human bias?
Human biases in the light of algorithmic biases.
Right. So in many cases, so here there is a mixture of a couple of things. So one is, on the one hand, algorithmic systems are usually trained, or they learned from, or they extract patterns from. You can say it in many ways. Usually when we say the algorithm learns, what we mean is that it extracts statistical and other patterns from historical data. And one of those patterns can be discrimination, in the sense that if my historical decisions taken by humans that have their own biases, if that data contain biases, then of course the algorithm will also reproduce those biases and often will exaggerate them, which is more complicated. So that's one side. On the other side, what we see with the use of algorithms is that there is a much stronger dataification of some processes. By that, I mean that there is more data being captured about certain things for which data was not captured so much in the past. So for instance, we have seen the digitalization of many decisions by courts and judges. And we have much more ways of scrutinizing whether judges in many jurisdictions, what are the decisions that they are making, because there is much more digitalization around those decisions, or around human resources decision, right? So of course, if you have a pile of CVs printed on paper, there is no trace that you selected certain CVs and did not select others. When this process becomes automated, then you have much more data about human decisions, not only about machine decisions, but you do have more data about human decisions. And that data can be analyzed, and you can find patterns of discrimination in that data. So there is a mixture of these two things. So on one hand, technology allows you to have a much more detailed view about human biases. On the other hand, technology reproduces and often reinforces those human biases. I hope that answered the question. So there are many tools. As I said, there are many tools in algorithmic hiding. Here are some of them. There is one company here that is quite famous, Pymetrics. There is HireView. Maybe you have heard about some of these companies in your own practice if you are into human resources, right? And they have many products that evaluate questions. They make you play a game. They make you record a video. And in some cases, there are validation studies. In other cases, there is some validity that is claimed. In some, often they say that they are unbiased, and I think the overall, I would say the overall evaluation of many of these is that the claims tend to be a little bit vague or quite vague, and the claims about being free from bias, they also often are not strongly supported by evidence. Some of you mentioned, one of you at least mentioned Amazon. Amazon deployed an AI-based ranking of candidates or was about to deploy an AI-based ranking of candidates and pulled the plug on it a few years ago because it determined that this system was biased against women. And so that was like the end of that tool. And according to Amazon, they don't use this artificial intelligence tool in the recruitment, right? Now, I also mentioned that there are tools that can predict your that pretend to predict your personality from a CV. These tools, many of them have been found to be very ineffective in the sense that, for instance, if you provide your CV as a text file, they give you one score, but if you provide your CV as a PDF file, they provide another score, even if the content is the same. And there are even more problematic cases. So for instance, here you have software for video interview that categorize a person, for instance, extraversion in a certain level in the scale. But if you make your image a bit darker, then suddenly you are less of an extrovert, and maybe you are at the bottom. There is something quite terrible, right? So if your lighting is not very good in the room where you're recording the video, the tool will say that you are more neurotic, or you are you score higher in neuroticism. So, which is quite like this was research from a German group of doing investigative journalism, and they tested some of these tools, and in general, whenever you test systematically some of these tools, the results are not very good. The results tend to be that, particularly the ones that analyze voice and video and pretend to do personality assessment, they don't work as advertised, or they don't work at all. So first, like, where does this discrimination come from? And there was like a question about whether what do we think about human biases, right? So part of this problem comes from human biases, particularly an expert or editorially provided rankings, right? So all of these job search engines, something that they do is that they hire people or they create their own databases of, okay, here is a job description, and here is a good candidate for this job description, and here is a bad candidate for that job description. All of that is editorially provided, expert provided rankings, and they can have their own biases. But also clicks, user feedback can be biased. If I'm going to, let's say, without questioning it, if I take data provided by users, for instance, where do they click, or what people do they select, maybe I am giving my tool, I'm training my tool to also, again, repeat and reinforce human biases, right? And there are other biases. For instance, documents are constructed in different ways. And there are studies that show, for instance, that if you look at LinkedIn profiles, then different parts of the profile are completed at different rates by different people, right? Particularly men and women will complete different parts of the profiles in different ways. And that also affects the way in which algorithms can rank these profiles. Now, I would say, like many of you, if you work in human resources, you do understand this process as a pipeline, right? There is a pipeline, it has several stages. And what we need to see also is not only that there may be some algorithm, some filtering, or some strategy that is creating or introducing a bias, but also that it happens in a broader context. And in this context, we have the structural biases that determine how the job description is written, what is the applicant pool for this job. And then after the algorithm, and the algorithm can produce a slate, like a short list of candidates, then We also wonder about whether there are institutional biases or even individual biases from the point of view of the person from human resources who does the assessment or who does the offer and so on. So these algorithmic biases, they coexist with further biases along this hiring pipeline. So let's do a little attention check. If you can go to wooclap.com, go to FINDHR1, and then you can answer this quick question. What are other specific biases that we mentioned in addition to algorithmic biases in a hiring process? So wooclap.com, and the code is FINDHR1. Okay, so let's look at the results. Yeah, we spoke about these structural biases, right? Hiding bias is a very kind of general term. I will not. I would say it's not specific enough for the purposes of our course. And there are also functional biases. Functional biases are ways in which different tools can make some tasks easier than others or some actions easier than others and guide you in a certain direction, and those don't enter the picture here. So what we did mention were structural biases, which prevent certain groups from, for instance, even seeing that these job advertisings are there. Now, we also talk about processes, and I'm going to go quickly through this part, right? Because this has to do with the criticism of how we, in my case, I'm a computer scientist. I work with developers and software engineers, quality assurance people, etc., like all the people who work in the development of these technologies. And we tend to be a little bit like this guy, sometimes a little bit too much. And so this is the character from the Big Bang Theory. And we tend to, I would say that in many cases, data scientists who are behind many of these tools, they think they are more rigorous than social scientists, or they have, some of them have very good intuition, some of them do not. Some of us do not have very good intuitions about this. There is also like something about data science and how it is framed as a general purpose tool. So computer scientists, we are taught over and over during our training as in computing engineering or computer science to think in terms of little modules and little boxes that are connected to other boxes, and we are taught to learn in terms of these structures that have separate pieces. And often, like an algorithmic hiring pipeline has pieces that are interconnected in ways that are very complex, and also fairness and discrimination are things that cannot be really measured if you just look at some tiny box. In addition, we see our discipline as somehow like very general purpose. And again, this algorithmic hiring is really a discipline that interacts with many other areas. Some of them are highly political, and some of them have to do with accountability, and they don't have to do so much with the statistics. There is also a big data divide in the sense that there are companies and organizations that have access to large amounts of data and also to large amounts of computing power that allows them to do things that other organizations cannot. And in this case, this can bring concentration of power, but it can also reduce the accountability in many cases. And I will say, and here there is a very interesting debate about transparency, right? So one of the first reactions when you start seeing an algorithmic hiring system in place is a concern about whether people who are processed by this algorithm know that they are being processed by an algorithm. And the answer is not always a sounding yes. Right. So, for instance, you have people, we have some of our experts have interviewed people who say, well, I got a rejection notice at 6 a.m. in the morning. I highly doubt that that was a dedicated human resources professional who sent me that rejection notice. Most likely it was an algorithm. And then there is opacity because there is not like there is not clarity about the fact that an algorithm is being used. And here there is a great book by Frank Pasquale called The Black Box Society. The title of the book is at the bottom of this slide, The Black Box Society, highly recommended book about transparency. And in this book, Frank Pasquale says, it's not really that there is like transparent and opaque, but there is like spectrum of disclosure. In some cases, you are close to the side of secrecy in this spectrum. In that case is when you don't disclose things in detail, or you disclose things to a small group of experts, or you don't disclose things immediately. In that means you are on the side of preserving secrecy. If you provide a deep, comprehensive disclosure, if you provide it to everyone, and if you provide it now, then you are more on the side of transparency. And between secrecy and transparency, there are many options. So quick attention check. What do we mean by this spectrum of disclosure then? What is this spectrum of disclosure? Can you answer in wooClub.com? What I just say like a spectrum of disclosure? Which of these three things does it reflect more? What do we refer at this spectrum of disclosure, or what does Frank Pasquale says is a spectrum of disclosure? So you can go to wooClub.com. You can keep that window open so it will be easier for you to answer. Okay, we'll wait for a couple more answers. All right, so what we mean by this spectrum of disclosure is that there are multiple ways in which disclosure can happen. And it can be very private and very secret. It's still disclosure. It looks like transparency, but it's not. And there is like more true transparency and true disclosure that happens on the other side. So the spectrum of disclosure means that when you disclose something, you not always disclose it fully. There can be a spectrum of things. This is what we call the spectrum of disclosure. Now, there is also like a couple more things about technology development that are actually a bit sad, but they are true. One is blind spots. And like there was this case like a few years ago, Hewlett Packard, they manufactured a camera for a laptop that could track the face of a person as you speak. So as you moved in the screen, the camera will follow you. And then in a computer shop, one person there realized, one of the people who sold these laptops, he was black, and he realizes that as he moved, the camera will not track him. And actually, the camera will not track you if you had dark skin. It will track you only if your skin was light, which bears the question then, in that development team, in that user testing team, in that marketing team, was there no black person, no dark skinned person who could do that testing? And the answer was probably no, right? So that has to do with these blind spots. And the other problem is that we usually see teams that, for instance, like I gave the example of Amazon, right? Like reactive modes. I give the example of Amazon. Like they develop a tool, then they realize that there is something wrong with the tool, either because a journalist calls them up or like calls them out, or because there is some really important failure, and then they start caring about fairness. And the AI Act looks to reduce this and take more preventive steps instead of these reactive steps. So what do we mean by these reactive modes? Quick attention check. I'm going to wait for 50 answers. Okay. 7:40. Still not there. 48. All right, so the correct here is that yes, that reactive mode means that people tackle the fairness issues when the issues arise, and they are not like preventive steps. And this is really not a good idea as a development methodology to wait until the problems arise. Now, let me give you a quick overview of this research field, and with that, I will basically finish, and I will open the floor for a couple of questions. So this field is usually named FATE. I teach a course that is called Fairness, Accountability, Transparency, and Ethics. There is a series of workshops. There is a conference. It was a couple of weeks in Brazil. Sorry for that. It was a couple of weeks ago in Brazil about fairness, accountability, and transparency. This is a very interdisciplinary setting, and in this setting, we need to think about context. We need to work with lawyers. We need to work with anthropologists. We need to work with social scientists, and with technologists, of course, and with human resource professionals. So it's a really complex field. And we typically think in terms of like different areas here: computer science, social sciences, and law. Now, let me give you an overview of the course. Today, you're seeing this module on introduction. Then at 6 p.m., you have the module on data processing, on ethics by Mariana. Unfortunately, we'll not be able to stay for that part of the course, but Mariana will take over. And then tomorrow morning, there is like ethics, and then Nina in the morning in the second part to provide a legal perspective. And then next week, we have 4 other modules and so on. We will speak about job search portals. I will be teaching that part. And then lessons number 6, 7, 8, and 9 are more technical, and they are about fairness in computing, in information access. They are about recommendations. They are about rankings and so on. Particularly lessons 7 and 8, you will find them very interesting. They go quite deep into these issues. So you will have a lot of, I know you're a very well-informed audience because of your answers about algorithmic discrimination. So here you will find like more technical content. You find ethical content, legal content, and like more systems level content that I will be providing. Then there are 8 hours of case studies and 8 hours of data analysis. Case studies are work that you will do in groups. So we will divide you in like small chat rooms where you will be able to interact with other people from the course and work on studying a bunch of cases. Like for instance, there is a very there was a question about AI tools in job interviews. We will talk about those, right? So we'll have some people from an NGO called Algorithm Watch, and they have been for years working on raising awareness about the potential harms of technology, particularly algorithms, and they will tell us like what they have found about this algorithm, and then there will be group discussions where we could learn about like these issues and how they can be detected, how they can be mitigated. And then we will do a data analysis work that we will do it through a graphical interface for the people who are not like into programming. But if you have some coding experience, we will also show you how to do this with code, like, and you'll be able to practice with code. So it doesn't matter if you don't code or you code, you will be able to work with a ranking, understand what's a fair ranking, understand what's an explanation of a ranking, and so on. So this goes quite deep into this topic, doesn't stay on the surface. So do you have any questions about this, like this slide that I'm showing, about the case studies or the data analysis? So case studies is you will work in groups analyzing one of these topics. It's 8 hours, so it will be sessions of 2 hours in which we will go deep into a discussion among the students, among yourselves, on these case studies, and also like a discussion with Algorithmic Watch. And data analysis, you will work with actual data, either through a graphical interface or through code. Sorry, questions?
I'll send an email with a video for the programming interface, the graphical interface to install. Yeah, for the data analysis part. Yeah, we are finalizing it.
Perfect. So that will, like, we will see all the theory first, and then we'll have the case studies, and then we'll have the data analysis. Any question? So here there is a recommended reading. You will find it in the slides. There is a recommended video that is quite funny, but it's also true about artificial intelligence harms. And that's all from my theory part. And I will look forward to if you have further questions.